Welcome back to the Valley of the Suns podcast. I'm your host, Kory Meller. Joining me today again is current Valley newspaper editor and former Suns beat writer Nick Smith. Nick, thanks for being here.
And more importantly, your friend.
Most importantly, my friend. We're doing something a little bit differently today. We're going to be covering a bit of Suns history, and we're going to be talking about our top 5 Phoenix Suns teams of all time. I've compiled my list. Nick has his list. We haven't shared them with each other. We're going to go through the list, and we're going to see what we come up with. I'm excited to do this.
See, this has been... The reason why we're doing this is because this has been such a rough decade. The Suns were really good for a long time in a lot of different eras.
My entire lifetime.
Yeah, it's important that we revisit that and remember.
And we're coming up on the 50th Phoenix Suns season. This next season will be number 50. And so I think it's important to go back and take a look at some of the memorable teams of the past, especially since we haven't made the playoffs in 7 years.
So getting close to the anniversary of the coin flip that was lost for Jabbar then, right?
Very close.
Alcindor at the time.
That'll be, what, a year and a half away? Yeah. 2 years away? Was that?
I don't remember. Who knows?
Anyways.
1969, maybe?
Without further ado, let's start going through our list. Nick, why don't you show me who you have at number 5?
Okay, well, here's the thing. I'm not sure if we should just, do the whole list and then you do your list. I'm not sure what's...
I think we should go one at a time. You do 5, I do 5, 4, 4. Because then we kind of build some drama as we get up to the top.
Okay, well, before I start, I want to throw out a couple honorable mentions, and you can be shocked if some of them are on your top 5. And I just want to say, I really tried hard to make my top 5 from a variety of different eras. Yeah. Because there's two obvious eras of Suns history to go to. And I really did my best, and I'm willing to be talked out of this fifth one. But anyway, so I'll just get started. A couple of them, I'm just going to get one out of the way. I do not have the 1976 Suns on my top 5 list.
I don't either.
Really? Okay, well, let's talk about why.
Because from a talent perspective, they're not one of the 5 best Phoenix Suns teams. They were an overachieving team. I'm going to cheat a little bit here.
Okay.
They are my honorable mention.
Okay.
I had one honorable mention, and it's the Cinderella Suns, the 76 finals team that lost to the Celtics. They were good. They had some good players, a few all-stars, but they really didn't have all-NBA performers. They didn't have superstars. And when you look at some of the other teams in Suns history, they don't stack up the same way. They only went 42-40 in the regular season. They just caught fire in the playoffs, played really well, and took the world champion Celtics to 6 games.
And if you look at the stats, they were really a 4-man team. And it's not like, they were good players, but there wasn't a world beater on that team. You have, Paul Westphal, Alvin Adams, Curtis Perry, and Dick Van Arsdale. So those are all Suns legends. Gar Hearn was on that team. John Shoemate, but those guys didn't even play
well, and
half
those
the
are
season.
All role players. Van Arsdale was old at that point. Westfall's in his prime, so Westfall's really the star of that team. Alvin Adams, I think that was his rookie season.
Exactly.
So
that's my thing. You have these 4 guys who average over double digits, but that's really it. Because a lot both Hearn and Shoemate, they didn't play half the season.
If we're talking about the most important Suns teams, I think this would definitely be up there. Probably not 1, but maybe 2 or 3. But if you're looking at the best Suns teams in terms of talent, I don't think they're in the top 5. But I do have them as my honorable mention.
Pat Riley was on that team.
He was. I don't think he played, at least not very much.
Yeah. So, and another thing I think to note is, like you said, they were overachievers. There's that story that Rick Barry, the Warriors really should have been the team that went to the finals, and he sort of quit on the team in that Game 7, kind of like Kobe in 2006. And the other thing is that was before the merger. So talent-wise in the NBA, it wasn't a league at its peak at that point.
Yep, I agree.
So a couple others that I'm just going to throw out there real quick. If you look at the top seasons for the Suns just in terms of wins, a surprising team near the top is the 1981 Suns, 57. Now, they're not on my list, but I just thought kind of interesting. It's kind of a similar thing where you have 4 guys that are pretty good, Alvin Adams, Walter Davis, Dennis Johnson, but then it kind of falls off.
Dennis Johnson was all-NBA first team and all-defensive first team that year.
Yeah, exactly. And then, here's the last one. This is kind of a weird one, but they won a lot of games, and the talent on the roster really jumped out at me. The 1998 Phoenix Suns.
Ooh,
Isn't that weird?
Is odd.
56 wins. and that only got them third in the Pacific Division.
Well, you'd have Lakers and the Trailblazers at that point, right? Was it Trailblazers who got?
Let me look at my notes here. This is what I did remember. So they lost to the Spurs in the first round with the 4-5 seed. Yeah. Both those teams won 56 games, and think about that. They were the 4-5. I think Utah, Lakers, and Sonics all won 60 or more games that year. That's a stacked conference.
Oh no, in the Pacific Division. Wow, I can't believe how.
Yeah,
the Supersonics were in the Pacific at that point. So the Sonics and Lakers both had 61 wins. The Suns had 56.
And it's a pretty good roster. I mean, you have Kidd basically coming into his prime. Danny Manning is still there. Clifford Robinson. McDyess was really good.
McDyess was on that team. Was Chapman still
around?
Rex
Chapman was still on that team.
Yeah,
that's a team that I considered possibly throwing on there in my top 5, but I couldn't do it.
I don't have them on my top 5 because outside of Kidd, I don't think you had any all-stars on that team unless I'm mistaken. Robinson,
I think you're right.
All-star.
Right.
McDyess was good. Kidd was the star on that team.
Of course.
And again, it's when you look at some of the other teams that will make the top 5, they had more than one all-star. They had more than one stud who made All-NBA.
There was a couple Suns teams with Kidd, the 2000 team that went to the second round.
Yep. And this 97-98 team, I feel like, was Kidd and some good role players.
Right.
But still, and the rest of the roster was really mostly role players. McDyess was good. I'll give you that. That was kind of when he was in his prime. But Cliff Robinson was always more of a sixth man when he was with the Suns more than anything. He wasn't quite the same as he was earlier in his career.
And then my last thing I'm going to say before this, the team of the Nash era that probably got the actual closest to getting to the finals, 2006, is not on here for me.
Oh, no.
And the reason is I don't think you can have a top 5 Suns team when Amari Stoudemire didn't play that year.
2006, 2007?
2005, 2006.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you meant 2006, 2007.
No.
Okay.
I mean closest getting to the finals in terms of games. Yes. I think they went 6 to, yeah.
No,
it's a tough one because they had I think that was my favorite Suns team in that era because the run was so memorable. Lakers, Clippers series.
That's fair. That was probably the most memorable playoffs of that era.
Absolutely.
But that was an overachieving team. Diaw came out of nowhere. You didn't have Amari.
Raja Bell was real good that year.
The Tim Thomas year.
Yeah, that was when he hit the 3 against the Lakers. Yeah, yes. Great team, but without Amari, I just didn't feel like it compared with the other 5 teams on here.
I'm with you on that. I don't have them on my top 5 either. So before we spoil too much more,
let's do this. All right.
Give me 5.
All right. So number 5, I have the 1993-1994 Phoenix Suns. This is a team that was favored to probably win the whole thing starting the year with Jordan retiring. They got up 2-0 against the Rockets in the second round. Both games were in Houston, and then they lost the series. But this was a really talented, deep team. You have Barkley still, at the very end of his prime. Kevin Johnson actually played 67 games, which is, if you're looking at these teams and looking at KJ's game totals, he gets injured all the time. It's like you forget because he's such a legend.
He really only had a few seasons where he actually made it through the entire season.
Exactly. Yep. So you had AC Green, Dan Marley, Cedric Ceballos. This was a talented roster, I thought. So that's my... I agree. And I really wanted to do a team from a different era, because there's other teams from the Barkley era on this, but I just thought, if I had the 94 Suns going against the 98 Suns, I just don't think it's much of a choice.
Well, I went in a bit of a different direction. It's a team you've already mentioned. I went with a different era, and that is I picked the 1980-81 Suns.
There you go. Hey, there you go.
The reason I did this is because they won 57 games. They were first in the Western Conference.
Right.
So that's a huge accomplishment. They beat the Lakers out by 3 games. They beat the Showtime Lakers, the early Showtime Lakers, out by 3 games to win the conference. They had, again, it was a couple players and then a bunch of role players, but Dennis Johnson had just an awesome year. All NBA first team, all defensive first team. Alvin Adams was in his prime, who he was never quite an all-star, but he was always that borderline all-star and really just a really solid player, a really amazing passer for a big guy and could really run. I really think he would have fit in today's NBA better than he fit back in the 80s. You also had Walter Davis and Truck Robinson, who were both all-stars, I believe. You had 3 Suns finish in the top 25 in MVP voting. I think that's important. Obviously, there weren't as many teams back then, but
right.
I really think that just for the amount of games they won and the fact that they won the conference again, beat the Magic Johnson and the Showtime Lakers, which I think is impressive because at that point they were running people out of the gym already.
Do you care statistically that the 94 Suns have 5 guys in double digits for points a game? The 81 Suns have 4, but nobody gets over 20. There's 2 guys that do it for the 94 Suns. Somebody also has 19, which is more than anybody scored. There's 3 players basically on the 94 Suns that scored more than anybody on the 81 Suns.
I think it's hard to judge because they're different eras, so I don't think you can look at just points per game, black and white. I will say that part of why I picked them is because I didn't want to have too many teams from one era.
Exactly. That was my thing.
And of the Barkley era, I feel like 93-94 was actually the weakest team.
I agree.
And You're right. That's why I kept them out of the top 5.
Which is kind of surprising because in my memory, like, it doesn't make sense. But actually, and I don't want to give too much away here, but Barkley statistically was actually better in 95 than he was in 94.
He was. And I want to mention going into our top 4 teams, for me, 1 is heads and shoulders above the rest. And then 2 to 4, I think, are close. This 5th team I have, the 80-81 Suns, I have them quite a bit behind 4. If I was ranking them by a scoring system, 2 to 4 would be pretty close. 5's quite a bit lower than that, I think.
Yeah. I guess my argument would be that I think the players at the top, I think I would take a Barkley, Marley, KJ trio over the 3 best guys on that team. And then I think this team is a little bit deeper.
I think the argument for the 93 team would be Barkley. Because I think on the 80 team, they didn't really have anyone like that. But Truck Robinson was really good in his prime. Dennis Johnson, it was the best year of his career.
Yeah,
I mean,
that's
he
true.
He had an MVP caliber season. And when you look at some of the others, Marley, I love Dan Marley. He's one of my favorite Suns. He's probably 2nd or 3rd, my favorite all-time players for the Suns. He was a good shooter. He made a couple all-star teams. He was never going to be a complete difference maker. He was really a role player who relied on KJ and Barkley around him to create shots.
Sure, right. I mean, I would be willing to be convinced otherwise.
Sure.
I just think it's,
Moving on, who do you have at 4?
At number 4, I have the 1995 Phoenix Suns.
Okay. Interesting.
And you have the...
Number 4, I actually have the 2004-2005 Suns.
Okay, let's just jump ahead. Where do you have the 1995 Suns?
I have them at 3.
Great. So we have 3 and 4 mixed. So let's argue this out.
2004-2005, Nash was in his prime. Amari was still a little young, and so Amari wasn't quite in his prime. Now, obviously, next season he got hurt. I think Amari hit his prime in 2006-2007. That was obviously his career year, All-NBA first team. In 04-05, he was still All-NBA. I think he was second team. Nash was great, but if you look at the rest of the roster,
yes,
you had
it is top-heavy.
You had Nash, Stoudemire, Marion, a very young Joe Johnson, and then a lot of nothing.
Right. I agree with that. This is the 95 team is deeper. My argument is the top of the 2005 roster I would take over this 95 roster. This was Nash at his almost absolute apex, and I know Amari wasn't in his prime, but he averaged 26 points a game. And statistically, this was Sean Marion's best year.
Yes, it was. The reason I take the 95 team ahead of them is what you mentioned. It's the depth. Barkley had a great... Now, Barkley was not quite as good as his MVP year, obviously. But like you said, Barkley had a better year statistically in 95 than he did in 94. And if you look at the people that they added in 95, their entire bench could have been starting on other teams throughout the league. They had the deepest team in the league. And if it wasn't for the Rockets, this team probably would have won a finals. This team was almost as good as the 92-93 Suns. And again, if you look at the players they added AC Green. They added Danny Manning. They added Wayman Tisdale. Manning was an all-star. Wayman Tisdale was a borderline all-star earlier in his career and averaged double digits for his career. AC Green was a real solid starting power forward. Not a scorer, but just a really solid player. If you look at this team, 1-8, 1-9, deepest team in the league, probably the deepest Suns team of all time. And for me, that's why I'm put them ahead. And again, as I mentioned earlier, 2 to 4 for me are all really close. So I'll hear the argument to rank them in a different order.
I think the depth is a little deceiving. What I'll say is that Danny Manning and Kevin Johnson didn't play 50 games that year. So you are dealing with 2 of the top 6 guys.
But it was their depth that allowed them to get where they did, regardless of that.
Right, yeah, they did have depth. I'm just saying I don't think it's... And if you look at... I think a name like Danny Ainge jumps out at you. But if you look at Danny Ainge's stats for that year, it was a drop-off. I mean, this was the beginning of the end for Danny Ainge.
It was, but I think to a certain extent, when you bring so many of these veteran guys in, they bought into a more reduced role. And I think...
Yeah, but Ainge had been there forever, and his stats were better in 93. I'm just saying Ainge was older. I mean, he was 35 years old.
Ainge was older. Manning only played 46 games. That's okay. Manning still averaged almost 20 points a game that season. He was coming off 2 All-Star seasons.
Well, yeah, but he played 40-something games, though. I mean, he was good, but I'm saying,
46.
Yeah, but I guess what I mean by that is that's a smaller sample size. Like, if you, 20 points, that's great, but that might have dropped if he played 80 games.
It could have been. I still think, even the 10th and 11th guys, Joe Klein at number 11 was always a decent backup. You didn't have any scrubs on this team. These were all guys who would have been a rotation on any other team in that league. And I feel like the depth puts it over the top still. Wesley Person was a rookie. He came out and scored over 10 points a game. He shot over 43% from 3. You had all the pieces on this team. Yes, KJ got hurt. Yes, Manning got hurt. This was still a heck of a team, and they still almost got it done.
Yeah, they're a heck of a team. So here's one last thing I'll throw at you. At what point do we take, or how much stock do you put into what they did in the playoffs? Because this team underachieved, I would say, and the 2005 Suns did not. And they played the world champions with, at that time, probably the best player in the world. But I think it's fair to say that when you're up 3-1, and you have the home court, that's borderline underachieving. You got to win that series. That's what I'm saying.
This is bringing up old wounds. Of course you have to win it,
right? But so was there something fundamentally flawed about that team where they weren't able to? I mean, they blew back-to-back years to the Rockets. Was there some
I think you could argue that Barkley was never able to get his teams over the hump in the playoffs. I mean, they made the finals one year. I think you could argue that point. But Nash never did either. Barkley's at least made a finals. Nash never got us to a finals.
Yeah, but we're only talking about this year. And Nash got to the conference finals this year and lost to, Duncan in his absolute prime. And that really is what this comes down to with the Suns, is whenever they lose in the playoffs, it's usually to like a top 12 player ever. And Phoenix has just never had that.
Yep, I agree. So at the end of the day, I think the depth edges 95 over 05 for me. I will admit it's close. I didn't think Murray was quite at his peak. I didn't think the rest of the team was really that deep outside of Marion and Nash.
Yeah, I just think the stats...
Richardson was a decent 3-point shooter. Joe Johnson was good, but he was still really, really young.
Yeah, he was young, but he averaged 17 points a game. My thing is, I'm just looking at these stats. Like, right, Amari was young, but he averaged 26 points a game. And Sean Marion averaged almost 20, and Johnson was at 17. So, and...
Right, but if you look at the other guys on the 05 Suns roster, and we just go down some of them, Stephen Hunter, Jim Jackson probably would have been on the 95 Suns. That's okay. Walter McCartney, Bo Outlaw, Paul Shirley, Jake Voskuhl, Zarko Shabarkaba. They signed the Japanese guy, Yuta Tabuzi. None of those guys would have even made the roster in 95.
Right, that's true. But how deep do you need a team to be? I think Jim Jackson, Quentin Richardson, and Leandro Barbosa are all good players, or they were in 2005.
Barbosa was really young. Jim Jackson was past his prime. I
get what you're saying. The depth can't compete. I just think at the top...
I think you need depth to win playoff series. If you're looking at one game between these two teams, 05 probably wins. You put these guys in a best-of-7 series, I'm not betting against the 95 Suns. It's hard because they're completely different eras. They play completely different styles.
That makes it difficult.
Part of why the 05 Suns were so successful is that they really invented this pace and space in the 7 seconds or less. And so they were they were really a revolutionary team at their time, and that helped them win a lot of games in the regular season. But it really never helped them get to where they needed to be in the playoffs.
Well, I guess you don't really need that much depth to win, though, because the Suns went farther than the 2005 Suns went farther than the 95 Suns did.
Yeah, but then obviously, it's not hard to believe that I have the 2006-2007 Suns ahead of these guys. They lost in the second round. Does that mean they're not as good as the 05 Suns?
No, but because I think even you know the difference between that and this. They lost that series because they didn't get a fair shake. We don't know.
Yes,
how
I know.
Right.
Losing 3-1 on home court is awful. But they lost to the defending champions, probably the best player in the league.
Agree.
And you know what? That Rockets team was stacked.
Yeah, it was a great team. It was a great
of Elijah one. So I don't think you can fault them for losing to the Rockets. You can fault them for losing 3-1 at home. Obviously, that's awful. But hey, even the 73-9 Warriors did that in the finals. It happens.
Right. I just think I guess right. I mean, we're just going in circles now, but I just think there should be some credit for being, best record in the league all year long, and then making it to the conference finals.
Yep, that's fair. So,
and I think Joe Johnson did matter because you could see the difference when he left.
You could, but if we're going to talk about injuries, right? Because Joe Johnson got hurt in those playoffs, 04-05, right?
No, I think that was 2004 is when he got injured, if I remember correctly. Or no, maybe not. I think you're right.
Yeah,
I think you're right.
They did not make the playoffs. It was the 04-05 team.
Right, but he played 82 games in the regular season.
Yeah, I mean, I think we both agree that they're both top 4 teams, obviously, and I think we both agree that they're really close.
Yeah.
We just disagree in the
It's
order.
arguing just to argue, and the thing is, we're super close with this list because my top 2 are also your top 2.
Yep.
Now, before we get, obviously, I think the answers we have are in the same order. I have 07, and then I have 93.
I do as well.
But I think it's closer than you say it is. I think it's worth a discussion.
It is worth a discussion. I think that 06-07, I think that Barkley from 92-93, it's close. I think he's the best single season player the Suns ever had.
Yeah, probably.
I think it's close. Nash in 04-05.
You might have number 2 and number 3 right here, though.
Nash 04-05 was close. Nash didn't win the MVP in 06-07. And
yeah,
I know that there's plenty of arguments that he didn't deserve either 04-05 or 05-06. But by Nash's standards, his first 2 seasons, he was a little down in 06-07.
Is that true statistically? Or is it are we remembering it that way just because he didn't win the MVP? And the MVP's weird. There's politics and
Barkley,
people's prejudice.
Barkley dominated that season when Jordan was still playing.
Yeah,
I mean, Barkley was the most dominant regular season player that season, and it was Jordan at Jordan's absolute prime.
Right.
You could argue Jordan 91-93, that was the height of the best player who's ever played or ever play basketball.
93 Jordan, actually, this is a point for the Suns. I think 93 Jordan is the best version of Jordan. I really do. I've always thought
I would agree. And Barkley was so dominant that he still won the MVP. Now, again, there's politics and stuff involved. Of
course, right.
But
Jordan was the best player in the world still.
This was you'd argue Barkley's a top 5 power forward, thereabouts.
Oh, yeah.
He's an argument for top 5 all time.
Oh, yeah.
A top 5 power forward all time in his best season by far.
Yep. No, I agree.
I mean, Barkley, he was still really good in 95. He was good in 94. He was great in the 80s with Philadelphia. 93 was a completely different level.
You're right. He's the best player. So if we rank both the rosters top to bottom, Barkley is number 1, but 2 and 3 are Amari and Nash from this year.
But I would say 4, 5, 6 are probably from the 93 team.
Maybe.
I think KJ would be 4. Marley would probably be 5. Marion enters the discussion at 6.
I don't know. Barbosa averaged 18 points a game. He was really good that year.
Yeah, as a bench player, do you look at Richard Dumas then? Richard Dumas had a pretty good year too. He averaged double digits.
Yeah, he did, and so did Kevin Johnson, but they also didn't play 50 games. Neither one of them did. I know that's like not really that big of a deal at the end of the day, but it is. I think it's just worth noting.
Well, I mean, if you look at 06-07, Nash missed some games too. How many games did he play?
06-07?
Yeah.
I don't know. 76.
I thought he missed more. I will say that what 06-07 has going for it is that team was more memorable from the entire league, I feel like, because...
What do you mean?
That team was more popular nationwide or league-wide. They had a 15-game winning streak and a 17-game winning streak in the same season.
Yeah.
That's pretty impressive. They were the most popular team on TV to watch.
I think that the Barkley eras, and I think we've had this argument already, the Barkley eras versus the Nash era teams, it comes down to, do you like depth or do you like teams that are more top-heavy?
Right, and I think...
The problem with this 93 Suns is they're also top-heavy too, and so maybe that's the difference.
They are, but I still think they had more depth than the Nash era. And
I phrased that wrong. I didn't. They're not top heavy, but I'm saying that their top is as good, close to the top of the 07 Suns.
I think the reason why I put 93 and 95 ahead of 07 and 05 at 1 and 3 instead of 2 and 4 is because during the Nash era, it was evident. Now, we got screwed out of one title. We can all agree on that. It was evident that you needed more depth. It was evident that selling the draft picks and trading guys hurt. It was evident that you didn't have the depth to compete with teams like San Antonio in the playoffs. You were trying to roll out Kurt Thomas against Tim Duncan. You didn't have a big guy who could go play against Duncan. You didn't have a big guy. The depth is what hurt those teams during Nash's era. If they had a little bit more depth, they'd have a title or two, I think. Now, Barkley didn't get a title, but I still think that if you put them in a best-of-7 series, I personally want more depth. As long as you still have those top guys, and I think in 93 they did.
Yeah. I have 93 number 1 too. I just think
injuries are a fair point. And so that's where this gets messy, because during the Barkley era, you never had a full season where everyone was healthy, really.
And I think when you're talking about best teams, it's how you did from beginning to end. That's part of it.
Right. And, I mean, they took the Jordan Bulls, probably the best Jordan Bulls team other than the 72-win team. They took them to 6 games.
Yeah, they did.
And it was close. Those were close 6 games.
Yeah.
A shot, John Paxson misses a shot, it's a completely different series.
Right, Game 7 at home.
Yeah.
Right. Now, they're probably not going to win. I mean, I just don't know how anybody was going to beat Michael Jordan that year.
But, I mean...
And they didn't win a single home game in that finals, which is,
That's kind of the story of Barkley's career. I mean, the Barkley Suns in the playoffs got it done, but this is a bit of a tangent. But even the 92-93 team, they went to 7 games with the Sonics in the conference finals, right? Mm-hmm. They went to, how many games did they go? And I got to go double check.
5 games with the Lakers and 6 games with the Spurs.
I mean,
that year.
They did not... They took the long route home.
That's another thing. That's so weird, because if you look at that Laker team, that's not like a memorable Laker team.
Not at all.
Vlade Divac might have been the best player on that team.
Yep. Now, I will say another argument for the 93 Suns is if you look at them, and I think you mentioned this, you had 7 players averaging double digits.
Yeah, they have the depth. That's
not only did Barkley have an all-time Hall of Fame year, they had depth all over the place. Richard Dumas, as a rookie, he's really one of the probably biggest what-ifs, at least for the Suns in the 90s.
Sure.
That team was good. It might still be the best team to not win a finals.
Right.
And if it's not the best, it's definitely in discussion for the best.
I think there are times, though, where we look back 25 years ago, and it's like, because the name is memorable, we tend to think that they may have been better in a certain season than they actually were. Yeah. So it's like you recognize Chambers, you recognize Ainge. You don't really have the same kind of fondness for guys like Raja Bell or Boris Diaw. But Raja Bell averaged,
great.
And he averaged more points than Chambers and Ainge did that year.
Right.
And Cedric Ceballos.
Right, but does it just come down to points? Because the 07 Suns scored a lot more points than the 93 Suns did. A different era,
It's a different era. You're right. Yeah. It's true.
I mean, because if you look, the 07 Suns played 0 defense.
I guess my point is,
if you bring defense into the equation, the Nash era teams all automatically drop a notch because they didn't even try to play defense.
Right. I guess my point is, I don't think there's quite the leap. If you're looking at Barbosa, Marion, Raja Bell, and Boris Diaw, I don't think Ainge, Chambers, Ceballos, and half of Richard Dumas' season is that much better than.
No, and
and you have to remember too that, and you aren't just taking those players in a vacuum. You're taking them as they You're not taking them over the course of their career. It's this year how they played with Steve Nash, who was the best at getting role players to reach their full potential.
It's true. Yep.
I would still probably go with the 93 Suns. I think there is the 07 Suns have that one ace in the hole where every other team you can say they had something that prevented them from winning the title. There was something within
there
that
was
team,
something that prevented the 07 team too as well. That's just David Stern.
But that's what I'm saying. It wasn't them though. They're the only team that didn't have like a flaw in their team that made it so that they couldn't win. We'll never really know what would have happened.
We know what would have happened. They would have won the title.
If they won that series.
They're not losing to the Jazz.
Yes.
They're for sure not losing to the baby LeBron Cavs.
100%. Who the winner of that wins the series. I'm just saying we don't really know whether it was a tied series. We don't know that they would have beaten the Spurs.
Yeah,
but they have the home court advantage.
Home court advantage,
yep.
Momentum in the series.
You're right.
It was after losing to the Spurs earlier, it was time.
That was the best shot.
Officially, we'll never know.
Right.
So, anyways, this has been a lot of fun. It's also been a little painful remembering some of these losses because obviously none of these teams won a title. Valley of the Suns listeners,
the best team ever is yet to come.
If you disagree with us on any of these, send us an email. Post on Facebook. Let us know which ones we got crazy wrong. I'm sure that there's dissenting opinions out there, especially because I know it's hard to look at eras that were before I was born. I got the 80-81 team on there. Again, we talked about the 75-76 team. There are some other good Suns teams in the 80s, and those are hard to look at. So if you disagree with us, let us know. So until then, thanks for listening. Nick, thanks for being here.
Yeah, thanks again. This was fun.
And we'll see you guys next time.